My name is Tansy Barrow Wallace, and I'm Frank Barrow's daughter.
Well, thank you for being here. So tell me, let's start from the beginning. Tell me about some of the earliest memories with your dad. What sticks out for you about your childhood?
The earliest memories are when my dad was in the Air Force. There are some carvings that are almost as old as I am, and I'm almost 62 years old. So I remember my first memory is when we lived in Japan in 1963. And I remember my dad carving and making all kinds of art figures, and I remember him making a church with the snow on it for Christmas. He was a very artistic person. But there are some things in his collection that are as old as I am, almost 60 years old, and they're still in his shop.
All right, my name is Manuel Wallace, and Frank Barrow was my grandfather.
Tell me about the earliest memories you have of your grandfather.
My earliest memory is going downstairs. His shop used to be down in the basement, and I go down there, and there's a washer and a dryer that was right behind his workbench, and I used to crawl up on the washing machine, and I could get a good view over his shoulder and watch him do I've watched him for hours doing different things, from flowers. No, he loved it. He talked to me, and we just talk about whatever, while he was carving, and he showed me a few pointers and things like that. So he was a real fun guy to talk to. Plenty of stories.
What lessons, and this can be either life or in his art, do you still carry with you today from Frank?
Man, that's I have to ponder that for a second. It was so much, just from art, just the creativity that he displayed. I'm a musician now, and I think it's all that art is kind of connected in a way, and just seeing him bring something from nothing, helps me. And then away from the art, he was just a great guy. Some of my fondest memories was him picking me up from school and taking me to McDonald's and buying me Big Macs and playing crossword puzzles and stuff like that. He was just an all-around awesome guy.
All right, so my name is Manuel Wallace, and I am one of Frank's grandchildren.
Tell me about the earliest memories of your grandfather.
The earliest memories, so my brother told you he started out in the basement. That's where his shop was. And I barely remember that. I was a lot younger then in the basement, so most of my memories are when he moved out into the shed. Mm-hmm. Outside, he bought a shed to put all of his artwork and to also, develop and carve as well. So one of my earliest memories was that he carved my older brother Stuart a knife out of wood, and he carved me a knife as well, because Stuart couldn't have one and I didn't have one either. So, and I learned that you need a little bit harder material than wood to cut things through, because I tried to go and use that knife and carve with the wooden knife he made me, but obviously it didn't work. So yeah. That's one of my earliest memories.
Very good.
Oh, my name is Helen Cadmus, Barrow. Franklin lived out in Bowling Springs, and I knew him, but I knew of him, but we didn't go together until a while later.
And how did you meet him?
Oh, I knew him, and we just, occasionally we would see each other, and then when after he retired from the service and we moved back to Shelby, we were married before. I went to Cleveland School. He went to country school. Back then it was called Green Bethel. And, I'd see him, but we weren't. But it didn't happen until he retired came back from the Army.
Oh, from the Army, okay. Mm-hmm. How important was his military service to him?
It was most important, because when he retired, he was with the Air Force One, which was the president's flights. He would handle all the flights for the president.
Tell me more about, I'm sure it was an honor for him to be able to mm-hmm. serve the president in that way.
It was.
How long did he work on Air Force One?
Oh, it was a 5-year assignment, and we retired. I guess maybe when he retired, he was still with Air Force One.
He's still with us today. What do you think he'd say about this exhibit?
Yeah. Oh man, he'd be real happy, I believe. He'd be real proud because he took so much pride in his work. And he never did it for the money, but he really appreciated people appreciating his art, you know. And I think he'd be real honored to see his whole collection on display here.
It's nice to get recognition when you put hundreds of hours into
Yeah,
something.
for sure, for sure.
Let's see. Tell me about your favorite piece that Frank that he did.
It would probably have to be his Noah's Ark came. When you talk about hundreds of hours, he put 900 hours into this thing. I mean, I remember him working on that and working on it and working on it. I mean, for months and months. And it's so intricate and detailed. You know, he has those animals walking up that cane, and I watched him do it too. A lot of it, you know. So it those are one of those things that sticks in my mind because those memories of watching him are tied to that piece too. So whenever I look at that, it's kind of
a lot of intricacy there. I'm still, I've seen it numerous times now, and I still look at it and think, I can't believe how much work it must have taken to get that piece done. Let's get your perspective. If Frank was here today, what would he say?
If he was here about this exhibit, he'd be, for one, very proud. And he'd be even more proud to know that, his family is kind of facilitating this event, and to have his work displayed, in his pretty much his hometown, rather than we used to travel to Raleigh every year so he could showcase his art in the North Carolina Museum of Art and History. But to showcase the art right here in Shelby would be even more special, and I know he'd take more pride in that.
I want to talk a little bit about his tools. Tell me about the handmade tools, and tools for wood carving were available to him, but yet he made his own tools. Why do you think that was?
Well, I believe, and one of my sons could probably give you more details, but I know he would take scissors, he would sharpen the scissors, anything that was metal, he would sharpen it, and he would shape it to the way it would work with his hand and the type of intricate details he wanted to use in whatever piece he was creating.
And how did he go about selecting the wood for his pieces? What was his process there?
He would use primarily soft woods. I know one of the woods that he used a lot were dogwood, poplar, and he may have used some maple. But I know that there's particular woods that he used that was easy to work with. He used also pine and cedar. Cedar. Yes.
Okay. Did you ever try wood carving?
I did cut my fingers up, and his tools that he had on me were super sharp, and I tried doing his flowers, and he helped me actually do a figurine of a young boy, and it was just a block of wood, and he said, I see a boy in that. Well, I was like, what? This is a square block of wood, and he kind of drew the outline, and he had me kind of carve around it till I cut out the, a rough, shape of a boy, and then he showed me, and then he took over and kind of whittled it down, and by the time we were done, it was a little boy in shorts, and it was awesome. So.
Yeah, and then so those sort of experiences with him, you think informed your interest in music or expressing yourself through music?
Yeah, just expressing myself overall. I mean, just those things. I'm real thankful for the childhood I had growing up. Just the love and the time that he spent with me. I spent time doing things with him and not getting into anything else, any other kind of.
And he taught you some wood carving as well?
Yeah, so he taught all of the grandchildren some wood carving. My older brother Stuart, I remember he carved a donkey or something and maybe a dog when we were smaller. All of us kind of took our go at it, but I think I probably spent the most time in my older, years, not that I'm old, but in high school, college, I actually kind of took some time to go out into the shop and try to actually learn what he did. and make something nice out of it. And so here in Shelby, I've done the art walk once where I do live flower demonstrations and show how he carved a flower out of wood. And no cane demonstrations. That's a bit. I've made a couple canes, and I understand a lot of the technique that went into it, but definitely not even half of it. I took a few things and was able to. After he passed, I was able to finish one of the canes he had started. So, but one of the cool techniques is these lines are all pretty much original designs. They would first start on paper. And so he would draw the designs on paper and then translate it to the wood and draw on the wood. And so once he had the lines drawn on the wood, he would take a Dremel and stick a nail in the Dremel and, follow along the line to create the carvings that way, but also as the Dremel would go through the wood, it would burn and leave a burn mark. So a lot of them you can see it's black inside of the grooves. So that's because of the burn mark from the wood. And that was also a very distinguishable smell that I associate with childhood too, because you walk in the shop and either it smells like a little bit of burnt wood or a little bit of cedar or something like that. So they all weren't Dremeled. Some of them, if he wanted to go for the burn mark, with the black inside, he would Dremel. And this one looked like he more so actually carved with the knife. Maybe started with the Dremel, but then carved it out with the knife. So
Frank's legacy lives within these pieces. I think as soon as I walked into his workshop, I felt that. But it doesn't tell the whole story of a person, their art. Tell me something about Frank that helps complete the picture. What's something about Frank that you want people to know that lives outside of his work?
Well, he was faithful. He liked sports. He was very interested in church work. But with us being military, we weren't exactly assigned to any church, though most of the bases had their own religious facilities, and so we tend that and do that. But he was very active in anything that he liked to do.
Okay. Well, what parts of Frank do you still carry with you today?
Well, they say I look like him. I believe the creativity, in a different sense. I don't carve, but I like to arrange. I see things and I say, oh, that would look really nice. But his creativity goes back to his great-grandfather and his mother. My great-grandfather, was a triplet. His name was Shadrach Barrow. And the other triplets were named Meshach and Abednego.
Okay.
But Shadrach Barrow was a whittler, and he did baskets. And we still have one of his baskets. It's almost 90 years old, but he said he would watch his grandfather make baskets, and he would go out in the woods and he would just start whittling. I think he said he was like 9 or 10 years old. And then his mother, I remember my grandmother, Mary Barrow, was very creative. She, on different occasions, she would just take what was naturally out there and make the most beautiful wreaths out of pecans and acorns and pine cones, and just would make arrangements. And as a young girl, I remember visiting my grandmother, my father's mother, and it was Easter, and she made chickens out of a lemon. Wow. And I don't know how but they were chickens, like little chicks, and they were in the middle of the table. And I was like, that is so cool. And marshmallows, she would just use whatever she had.
Very cool. Very cool. Is there anything else you'd like to share about Frank?
Well, I'm excited about carrying on my father's artistic legacy because he's a hometown boy, grew up in Boiling Springs. And I think that Shelby and Cleveland County needs to know all the history artistically that is here, and I just want to preserve that.
Yeah. Oh man, just that he was like what I said earlier, he's just an overall great guy. I have nothing but fond memories, and I'm really happy that, his work is going to be able to be on display and seen by a lot of people.
Awesome.
He was, whatever he was involved in it sincerely, and he really did. When he retired, he did start. He had a shop and everything, and that's where he stayed most of the time. Maybe sometime 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning. So he really enjoyed working with the wood.